everyone. Welcome to Cornsnake Morph Deep Dives with Sarah. Today, my makeup matches the subject of our video, which is the Cinder Cornsnake gene mutation. I have been getting a ton of requests for Cinder, like just everywhere. Cinder. And so I thought I would go ahead and do that video for you guys today. If you are new to my channel, that's probably a good thing because this is going to be like only the second video where I've had the software that I can actually put the photos up on the screen for you guys while I talk, which is going to be really great for Cinder because there's a lot of very subtle things about Cinder that set it apart from other gene mutations in Cornsnake. So we will talk about that. Before we do, please subscribe and like the video and all that stuff. Comment with, you know, what is your favorite Cornsnake morph, or what morph do you want to see a deep dive on next? I really would love to know those things, and it really supports the channel if you subscribe. And also check out my website. I'll link it down below. So I want to start out talking about Cinder with the history of Cinder, where it came from, and all of that stuff. So Rich Zukowski was actually the first person to discover Cinder. He went to Birmingham, Alabama to a reptile show and purchased some upper keys corn snakes, bred them, and then produced the first Cinders from that line. They originally were thought to just kind of be Anerythristics. For those of you who don't really know what an Anerythristic is, Anery for short is like, it's, you know, for a short name. And there's also another Anerythristic type called charcoal. But this was slightly different from your typical Anery corn snakes. He originally called it the ashy corn snake. Some people called it Morph Z for Zukowski, because Rich Zukowski is the person who found them. The original Cinder corn snake was produced sometime in the 1990s, and then in 2007 it was put to a public vote what the name should be. Should it be called the Z morph, so for Rich Zukowski? Should it be called Ashy, which is what Rich wanted to call it in the first place? Or should it be called other things? And Cinder was one of the options. The majority called it Cinder, so that's what we have today. So that is your brief history overview of Cinder. It has been called Cinder since 2007, which for me doesn't feel like it was that long ago. I know for some people watching, you are probably a little bit younger than me. I just turned 30 this year. But for me, 2007 was like the middle of my high school years. And to think for me that it wasn't technically called Cinder until like right around the time I was like in the middle of high school is just insane to think of. Like it feels like all of these things happened so long ago, but they really didn't. They really happened like a very short period of time ago. The late 1990s, I was obviously a child, but to think that it was called Ashy from the late 1990s and early 2000s, like all the way into like the mid to late 2000s is just insane to me. But that's just me. I feel old looking at this, thinking about that. So a Cinder corn snake is set apart from Anerythristic types because it's technically not Anerythristic. I know in my first book I did call it an Anerythristic type, and that was before we kind of explored it a little more and thought about how it affects other gene mutations. So I'm going to talk about Anerythristic mixed with other gene mutations, specifically AML. Anerythristic mixed with AML is called peppermint, and peppermints are not anerythristic. If you see a peppermint, especially a male, they will be red on white. That's why they're called peppermint. So that means that it's not going to be something like anery or charcoal that completely removes those reds. It just sort of makes the reds a little less, you know, I don't want to say a little muted. It's not even muted. Like it does take away a lot of the red, because if you see a Cinder, obviously Cinders aren't red. They look like ghosts, or they look like aneries, or they kind of look like charcoals, but they don't look like, you know, they don't look like they have any red until you mix them with other gene mutations like AML, or even if you mix them with hypo. You can definitely see these reds and pinks come out when you mix them with other things. So we have decided and determined, I don't want to say we've decided, but we have determined sort of as a community that this ashy Cinder morph is actually not anerythristic like we originally thought. It is a hypoerythristic. So hypoerythrism, which is really hard for me to say, and I hope I'm saying it right. It's pretty close. It's just a bunch of different like syllables that aren't normally put together in the English language. So trying to say it is super weird. Hypoerythrism is basically just a reduction of reds. Like hypomelanism is a reduction of melanin. The erythrism, the erythristic part of that is like the red pigment. And when you just put hypo in front of it, means that the red pigment is lessened in some way. So even though they appear to be aneries when they have full melanin, like in their normal form, so if you just have a straight cinder, they appear to be aneries a lot of the time, especially the females, and we'll get into that. They are not anerythristic types. They are actually hypoerythristic types. So that's just something to keep in mind anytime you're like thinking about Cinder as a gene mutation, is that it's not actually an anerythristic gene mutation like we originally thought, even though it kind of looks like one at first glance. So I'll go ahead and talk about the males and females and their saturation, since that is something that I kind of brought up there briefly. It seems like the males are typically more higher saturated than the females. And that's not uncommon in corn snakes. It's not uncommon in a lot of different species for the males to be prettier or just like have more color saturation than the females. The males will often, especially when you mix in other gene mutations, especially like hypo, you can definitely see that the males' pinks will kind of pop. They just look gorgeous. And then the females are a little less so. The females look a little bit more like a ghost. So if you're looking just at the like females of a cinder everything, so let's say we look at all of the females cinders like mixed with all of these other different gene mutations. If you just look at the females, you will probably still think that cinder is an anerythristic mutation because of how muted all of the colors are in the females. But then if you look at the males, you're like, oh no, that red is definitely still there. So it's just an interesting difference. We see that a lot in other anerythristic type morphs also. So we see that a lot, especially in anery and in ghosts. If you see an anery, a lot of people will talk about their saddles browning out or becoming brown or becoming like a peachy brown color. In aneries, it's usually a male. A lot of times you can look at an anery, and if you see those sort of washed out brown saddles, it's higher likelihood that it's a male. It's not 100% accurate, but the males, generally speaking, have more saturation than the females, and it's no exception when we're talking about cinder. The males generally just have higher saturation than the females do, especially as far as the reds are concerned. They're just brighter and prettier. One other thing that's really interesting about cinder that isn't like proven, but it kind of is, but it's kind of not, is that there's a higher percentage of males than females of cinders. In the majority of cornsnake gene mutations, you're going to get a nice 50-50 split for the most part. Amelanistic, your typical anerythristic, charcoal, stripe, motley, all of those things. When you're breeding them, it is equally likely that you're going to get males as females. Like, there's nothing that's saying you're going to like probably get more males than females. But when it comes to cinder, especially when you're breeding a cinder to a het cinder, it is much more likely that the visible cinder offspring are going to be male and not female. There are female cinders, don't get me wrong, but it's more like, instead of a 50-50 split, like I want to say 30-70 split, and the 30% being female, 70% being male. It just seems much more difficult to get female cinders than it is to get males. Males are just much more common. So that's just a fun fact. I know that isn't something that everyone was sort of expecting, but since we're talking about cinders, I thought I would try to cover all of these bases. One also interesting thing about cinder that we have kind of recently found out that we didn't really know or understand before is that we think that cinder is actually an incomplete dominant gene mutation. I have talked about incomplete dominant gene mutations a few times on my channel. I talked about it once, probably multiple times, but there was at least once when I talked about it when I was explaining how to calculate different gene mutations, how to calculate like what you're going to get visually if you breed certain things together. But when it comes to incomplete dominance, we do have a few examples in corn snakes, palmetto being the most obvious, where you will have a normal corn snake and you breed it to a palmetto. Your normal is going to be like a typical amount of melanin, where your palmetto is almost completely white. You breed them together and you get this sort of lightish colored snake that's almost a hypomelanistic. So that's an incomplete dominant mutation. You breed one extreme to another extreme and you get some sort of nice blend in the middle. And it's similar with Cinder. But what Cinder does is it kind of makes everything into a sort of Miami type. I've talked about Miamis before on my channel, I believe in the like normal types video. If you'd like to go watch that, I'll probably link it in a card above here. If you breed a Cinder to a normal type, all of the babies will actually look a little bit Cinderish. And when I say a little bit Cinderish, I mean they will have a light ground color, and a lot of Keys corns have a lighter ground color, but Miami is like, no, I don't want to say notorious, it's famous for having a lighter colored like ground color. And it also kind of gives that weird pixelated look to the scales and like where the pattern actually sits, and sort of the weird shape of everything. A lot of Cinders actually appear to be mask. I have talked about mask before and the different traits about mask, and how mask actually really does look very similar to Keys in a lot of ways. And I believe that even though Keys naturally does look very sort of mask-ish in a lot of ways, Cinder also almost always looks mask. I don't think that I've ever actually seen a homozygous Cinder that did not look mask as well. I'm sure that they exist because there's going to be something on every end of the spectrum, but for the most part, every Cinder is going to look mask in some way or another. So whether that means that they have a weird head pattern or a weird belly pattern or a weird like pattern to like their saddles or whatever, that weird mask look, it kind of comes out. And that happens a lot in the het Cinders as well. That is something that tends to pass on, but it doesn't pass on. So let's say you breed a het Cinder to a normal that doesn't have any Cinder in it at all. 50% of the babies are going to be het Cinder. You can pick out those babies pretty easily because the ones that aren't het Cinder, they're not going to have that mask kind of weird look, and they're also not going to have the light ground color that we see with the het Cinders. So it's not that it's mask in itself. Cinders don't have the mask mutation. Like it's not like every Cinder has the mask mutation. It just sort of looks a little bit mask, which is one reason that a lot of people wonder whether or not mask is actually a mutation or if it's just something that's being carried over from a Keys lineage or something like that, because diffused also originated in Keys lines. So maybe this is just a Keys thing. I'm not going to get into that right now. I did a whole rant video on it. I'll try to link it above for you guys. All that is to say, the het Cinders will often carry over the mask-ish look. They will often carry over a little bit of a lighter ground color, so they look more Miami, and they often will carry over those sort of weird, like I said, pixelated look to the saddles. It's very difficult for me to explain how this looks in any other way, but it is a thing. Like, you look at it and you just say, that looks like a Cinder. Like, it looks like it has Cinder in it. And I'll be putting up as many pictures as I can to explain these things for you guys as I go throughout this video, because it is weird. Like, Cinder is a very odd mutation. It's not anerythristic. It's one of the few hypoerythristic mutations that we have that looks like an anerythristic mutation most of the time, or at least a good portion of the time. And it being incomplete dominant, makes it even weirder. We have some hypoerythristic mutations out there. I would say that Buff and Toffee are hypoerythristic, and so is Yellow Jacket. If Yellow Jacket is a mutation, I don't know if I've covered Yellow Jacket in a video or not. If I have, I'll link it up above. If I haven't, that'll be something for a future video, and a lot of researching breeding trials, because not many people are purposefully breeding those things. There's not much information on it, is what I'm saying. So the question is, I guess, if we're asking questions, when you breed a Cinder into Miami lines and you have really, really crisp, nice looking Miamis because of the Cinder, is it really a Miami? Because what you're doing is you're actually breeding Miami with keys, and you're using keys to make your Miamis look better. So in my opinion, it's like using normals to make, or not normals, it's like using Okeetees to make your Miamis look better. That doesn't mean that they're, like good Miamis. It just means that they like have thick borders, and it's the same way with breeding keys lines into your Miamis. It doesn't mean that you have good keys, corn snakes. It really just means that you have Miamis that like look like keys, and not just keys, but the het Cinder specifically really does make that white in the background pop. So that's kind of like the big open question that I would ask the community in general. And I have asked this question before, and I've gotten mixed questions. The basic question being, if you are using het Cinder as a way to crisp up the look of your Miamis, does that increase or decrease the value of them as a Miami? And a lot of people, like, I got a lot of mixed answers. Some people said yes, because what I'm looking for is that look. Some people said no, because what I'm looking for is pure bloodlines. And then there's some people who are in between. They say it really depends. If the line looks good, like a good Miami without the Cinder is just the cherry on top. And then, so it doesn't really matter. So I guess that's my question to you guys, as the corn snake community, if you're watching this. If you wanted a Miami corn snake and you found out that the breeder created this Miami look that you're looking at by breeding Cinder into the lines, would you get that corn snake or not? Would you consider that to be a high-end Miami or a worthwhile Miami or not? And I imagine that a lot of these answers are going to differ based on if you're a breeder or just a keeper. If you're just a keeper and you're looking for the look, I imagine your answer is probably going to be, yeah, like this is the look I'm looking for. So it doesn't really matter how you got there. That's the look that I like. I'm keeping a pet and I really wanted it to look like this. So it doesn't really matter how it looks like this. That's what I wanted. And then there's going to be some breeders that are like, no, if I am breeding Miami for Miami's sake, if I want Miami stock, if I want this like pure line, then I'm going to avoid any and all people who have put Cinder into their line, because I don't want to breed the snake that's het Cinder to my normal and have to rely on Cinder to create that look that I'm looking for. I want that look to be over generations of selective breeding, and not just because you cheated and you threw in a Cinder that was going to enhance this look like in 1 generation instead of 4 or 5. So like essentially, you probably could tell by the way that I was speaking that I personally, if I was going to be, breeding a Miami line, I would avoid anyone who's been breeding Cinder at all cost. Not that they've been breeding Cinder, but that they put Cinder into this Miami line at all costs. Because first of all, I think it's cheating a little bit. If you know that a mutation is going to cause a certain look and you use that mutation to create the look instead of using the generations that it takes to selectively breed exactly what you want. But also, not just because of the like sort of you know, semi-morality of that, or the ethical implications of that. But also, as a breeder, if I want a Miami project, I want to be able to breed the Miami that I purchased from this person and a Miami that I have in my collection together. And I want a pretty good guarantee that all of those babies are going to be Miami. I don't want to breed those two and then half of the babies come out looking like regular old normals because they didn't have the Cinder attached to them, and then the other half only look Miami because of the Cinder. That's just me, and that's, everybody has their own personal opinion. I would love to know what yours are. I think that that's pretty much all I wanted to cover in this video. I hope that you guys enjoyed it. I hope that you learned something from it. If there's anything specific that you would like to know about Cinder or about any of the other gene mutations, let me know in the comments below. Go ahead and subscribe, share this video with somebody that you think is going to benefit from it, or a group that you think is going to benefit from it. I know there's tons of Cornsnake groups on every website everywhere, and many people just don't know this information. That's why I'm putting it out there. I've done the research and I'm passing it on to you. Check out my website, sarahsnakeshop.com. Check out my books. Check out, if you're looking for a cool snake mask, I have snake masks available. If you're looking for a cool snake t-shirt, I have snake t-shirts available in pretty much every size, and I really love those t-shirts. They're made of like really nice cotton, and they're just super comfortable to wear. So thank you for watching, and let me know in the comments what you would like to see next. I will see you in that next video.